Ask me how I knew our true love was true. Oh, I won't reply. I don't know the. Da, 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 da.
Your name's Wilson. Live.
Oh,
I'm not
Check the gap in my thigh.
check up in my thigh. Wait, did you say check up in my thigh? Sorry, what did you say?
No. Check the gap in my thigh. I have a thigh gap.
Whoa.
Hashtag humble brag.
You know what? Congratulations, Eli, on the thigh gap.
Thank you.
I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands.
You're listening to Deep Cut.
On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
Before we discuss Edward Yang's 1986 Terrorizers, please remember to give us a rating or review and subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts, because this will help others discover the show. And remember, you can keep up with us on Deep Cut Pod, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd. And if you want to talk about this movie with us or any other film, TV, you can join us on our Discord server. And also, if you're a big fan of the show, you can subscribe to us on Patreon for free. And if you want to support us monetarily, we really appreciate it because it helps us keep running the show. And right now, we are running a poll for our next episode in which we're going to go revisit one of the directors we've already talked about on our show. And you can go check that out on our Patreon, and all subscribers, free or paid, on the Patreon can vote on that. And so right now, we are voting on
Dun, 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 dun.
4 different films that we're going to revisit, possibly, depending on your vote. Agnes Varda's Beaches for Agnes, Kelly Reichardt's Meek's Cutoff, Eric Romero's A Summer's Tale, or Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin, which we haven't actually done a second episode on, because the first episode we actually did with director Andrew Ahn, who brought birth to us. He gave birth to us.
Thanks, Andrew.
So thank you, Andrew, for birthing us. And yeah, so please go check out the Patreon and all these other links at deepcutpod.com. Vote on what you want us to cover. I think that'll be kind of fun. And that episode will come out sometime next year in 2025. So be sure to wait up for that. Cool. So today we're talking about Edward Yang's third feature film, Terrorizers. So immediately after Taipei Story, which we just talked about last episode. So maybe I'll just quickly summarize it, then we can go into the film. And of course, spoiler warning, we're going to go into all the nitty-gritty details and the ending of this film, which is very interesting and surprising. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe to summarize what the film is about.
Good luck summarizing it.
It's kind of a fragmented web of life. It's kind of why I talk about it. It's 3 couples in Taipei, and their lives are interwoven. So what are the 3 couples? We have a married couple in which the marriage is falling apart. One of them is a novelist, and the other one is working in some kind of lab, and their marriage is falling apart. And then we have a couple, which is a photographer and his girlfriend, and that's intertwined with the third couple, which is like a pair of kind of teenage delinquents, where there's a girl and there's a guy, but the girl's kind of the main character of this couple, and she is prank calling people. And she's kind of like a gangster type, and she's on the run from the police. And because of her prank calls, it brings the novelist into the fray of this network of characters, as well as the fact that the photographer took a picture of her, and that picture kind of makes him fall in love with her, which makes things happen. So these 3 couples are somehow interconnected by coincidence and chance, by visual and audio. What is this movie really about? I have no freaking idea. Tell me what you think, Eli.
I find this movie picking up pretty much exactly where Taipei Story left off. We discussed in that episode how Yang's movies tend to end with a burst of violence. This one most certainly does, but it also begins with a burst of violence. Mm-hmm. So things are already bad in Taipei, and they're getting worse.
Right.
And whereas in Taipei Story, it's malaise, it's drawn out and waiting for that pop, things to boil over. I feel a more pessimistic Yang in this movie. It also feels a little bit rougher around the edges to me than Taipei Story does in a lot of ways, including and especially because of the ADR that seems to be pretty rampant in this one. I remember the first time I watched Terrorizers, similarly to Taipei Story, not clicking with it. And this time I get it more. I'd say of the ones we've watched so far, it's not my favorite, but I feel like I get what it's doing a little bit more, perhaps.
I think this film, we talked a little bit about this last episode. This film feels maybe, of the ones I've seen, the most Antonioni-esque of his films. Like the disaffectation, and also the most European cinema influenced. I feel a little French New Wave here, you know, and there's something about it that feels very different from the rest of his films that people are not copying. Because like EE people are like ripping off all the time. Like,
Of course.
you go to Asia, everyone just wants to be Edward Yang right now. But Terrorizers, because it's such a strange animal, is much more difficult to place, and I can barely place it myself. The construction, the editing, the montage, the general sequencing of scenes is interesting because of just a network of characters, which is very difficult to kind of put together. Like, why are we putting these three couples together? Why this coincidence? It is less linear than Taipei Story. Like, Taipei Story is very easy to follow. This is like what is happening, and even though there's like these scenes where they're kind of monologues, it feels like a very quiet, almost silent movie at points, right? And so it just feels strange in his oeuvre. So I remember, I think maybe rewatching Terrorizers at some point. This might be my third watch, but I don't have a log of my second watch or my first watch. So I think this was one of the ones that when I revisit, I was like, oh, I don't know what I saw in this the first time. But like, if this was like early on when you watch films and you're like discovering cinema, like this would be like a, whoa, what is this kind of thing? Kind of like a French New Wave was a, what is this kind of thing in the 60s, right? For the whole world. So
Yeah.
there's something kind of fascinating about it, but I don't know if in a way, not ages well, but like in a way fits with what people expect from Yang.
It's harsher, it's more frustrated,
It feels experimental.
it's more frustrating.
Oh, yeah. And so there's something fascinating. But I know somebody here loves Terrorizers, and I would love for him to tell us why and to maybe help us peek into like what's great about this film.
You know what? You guys have questions, and I don't think I have answers for you guys.
I really thought you were going to say you had answers.
Some things just can't be explained. And I think with Yang, I think I first visited this film probably a few months after I had seen A Brighter Summer Day and EE for the first time. And I think I went into it knowing nothing, and it felt to me like Yang was experimenting, definitely, what Ben was saying. But I think in its sort of like disparate stories that slowly get magnetized together through the course of the film, I ended up feeling a sort of like transcendent kind of feeling from it, where I think it's so hard for filmmakers to make coincidence feel like something that's not just like, oh, I'm just writing it off as a coincidence. But I think the way that Yang plots out this film and the way that things start weaving into each other slowly, and the realization from an audience perspective happens also quite slowly. I think that achievement of like understanding like how these people are connected is kind of incredible, and I don't think I've like seen that in many films. And also I think that it's like ruminations on like being alone or being lonely in a city is very, very deeply felt. Like, I think Yi is like about like interpersonal relations in a very like strong kind of way. Like a lot of Yang's films are about like people coming together and maybe coming apart. But I think like Terrorizers, more than a lot of them, is about isolation. And it sort of makes me want to like lock myself in a room and like not talk to people.
And turn out the lights.
And turn out the lights and put on a record and like...
This is a dark room.
Yeah, it feels very lonely. Like, even when characters are together in scenes, they're always separate. Like, you think about that scene where the young girl delinquent and, like, the young boy photographer are sitting in the room, in the dark room, and they're sitting on opposite sides of the room, and they're talking to each other. And that's how they, like, connect with each other. They're already, like, placed separately in frame. Terrorizers makes me think about a lot of different things. And on top of that, I think it brings such grand feeling in certain moments. And I would say that that smoke gets in your eyes sequence that we started out this episode with is like stands tall in my mind as one of the greatest sequences in cinema history that I've seen. Like, it just, like, if you ask me to name a scene or a sequence that really works in a film, I think, like, I would choose that one, because I think its placement in, like, maybe towards the end of the first act of the film, and its way of bringing two of these storylines together of the two young couples just through image, and I guess the sound brings some sort of feeling, but there's no dialogue to back this up. It is just through image and montage and cutting together. It's magic. Like, I think Edward Yang just creates magic in his filmmaking, and like, I think this was like a wild card or a wild shot in the dark type of a film, and I think the way that he pulls it off is just outstanding and just a testament to how great of a director he is.
To your point about montage, Wilson, this was the first movie where I wondered and looked up, is this Yang who's doing the editing? And it looks like he's not the credited editor, but I do wonder how much of a hand he had in designing those cuts, because across the movies there's a consistent language and the editors are not the same on every movie.
I think he has a very tight hand on the edit.
I would guess so.
I also like to mention that Wilson has a great list on Letterboxd about Smoke Gets in Your Eyes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The most cinematic song.
But also, this is the film that made my list. Like, this is the reason I have this list about big face. So let's talk about these things.
The best big face of them all.
Yeah.
The most listable movie.
I feel like we talked about big face before, but I think this is the thing, like, you have essentially an enlarged, usually image of a face against other human subjects, so you know it's big. You know, and I don't know what it is about it. I think it amplifies the feeling of cinema, because it's like, I'm already looking at a big thing, and like, let me look at a big thing looking at a big thing.
And it's even more self-reflexive here because it's the rebellious teenage young woman who enters the apartment where she formerly was with her boyfriend, who's now incarcerated. She opens the door thinking no one's living there, and opens it up, and boom, there's a photo of her on the worst day of her life when her boyfriend is arrested in a shootout. And inexplicable. Like, can you imagine opening a door to a place that you hadn't been for months and then seeing a giant printout of your face? Feverish.
Yeah, and she collapses. She faints.
Yeah, she faints like immediately. But I think that's the thing that like I was struggling with at the first act. I was like, what is the connection here? I was very confused. That Smoke Gets in Your Eyes section is when you see the photographer break up with his girlfriend. And I was like, why? What's happening? Like, why are they breaking up? Like, it's unexplained, except that she's tearing down all his images. She's like pissed off about something. And I was like, what is she pissed off about? And then like, I kind of, in that sequence when they finally meet the photographer and teenage delinquent, they're like, oh, he kind of fell in love with her after taking those photos. And that kind of makes no sense emotionally, like from a normal person's perspective, but it makes sense in the world of this movie where connection is so hard to come by.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of parallel lines in the movie, and I don't mean that literally per se, but the use of the montage to me is it contrasts people who don't know each other, who don't know of each other's existence, and have similar sets of feelings. This same isolation within Taipei. I'm thinking of the moment when the photographer's girlfriend is in despair after he has left a note saying, I'm moving out and not coming back. And you hear voiceover that describes feeling totally depleted and despairing and it's not worth living anymore. And it seems like it's the girlfriend's inner monologue or her leaving a voicemail or something. But then it cuts to the rebellious teenage.
The image of the girlfriend is her in an ambulance, right?
Well, before that, it's just her in the apartment. Then it cuts to the teenager.
But it cuts to her in the ambulance lying down.
As the voiceover goes over it.
And then it cuts to the teenager.
That was shocking for me. I was like, what?
Very shocking. Very, very shocking. And then the shock that it's not her voice who's doing the speaking. Because I think before that point, you'd not actually heard the teenager's voice.
Yeah.
The teenager is an interesting, like she's an active character, but she also kind of plays this role as commenting on what's going on because she's pranking people. And she's pranking people playing on their alienation, their insecurities. And it's almost like an ironic commentary where she's like almost making fun of people for being sad. But these people are like really fucking sad. And it's like kind of weird. Like that makes it very off-putting, right? Like to show you an image of somebody talking about wanting to kill themselves and then showing them on the way to the hospital and then telling you it's a joke. The voiceover is a joke in the next frame is unsettling and strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's abrasive.
Unsettling movie. It's just...
It is.
Off-putting.
Another thought that crossed my mind while watching is that this is maybe the movie where Young judges his characters the most. I think about, in my first viewing of this movie back in Professor Dombrowski's class, I remember thinking, oh, the photographer is like a main character. He's a protagonist. We're meant to sympathize with him. This time around, I think there's a moral cast on him coming from a wealthy family and taking these scandalous photos of people getting arrested and falling in love with a woman who he, through photography, kind of takes advantage of and takes her image without her permission. And he sort of flippantly leaves his girlfriend and then gets involved in the life of the husband and wife. And similarly, the teenage girl, I do feel there's something kind of judgmental about how she's drawn as a character.
Yeah.
Even if it is sympathetic.
I think watching this directly after Taipei's story, I think you could draw a lot of links between Tsai Chin's character in Taipei's story to probably like all of our main characters in this story, like Cora Miao's character, the delinquent teenage girl, and the photographer, as they all are, I guess, searching for a sense of identity, but in the process of doing that and jumping between different choices in their lives, they are sort of destroying or pushing away the people around them. And I think they're like sort of everyone's spiraling at the same time, but they're also catching on to each other, and they're sort of like creating this link between all three of these characters. It's interesting. I don't think Yang is warm on any of these characters. Maybe warmest on Cora Miao's novelist character.
I don't know if he is actually, because I think Tsai Chin's character in Taipei's story, like you can kind of root for. I think it's quite hard to root for any of these characters because they are all kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Like, I think the novelist character is like, she kind of has this disaffected, like, I don't know what to do in my life, which is okay, relatable, but then also she is kind of so frustrated at her husband, who is also not a great guy, throws his friend under the bus.
No, he's not.
But she's also not great because she's also the one, I guess, cheating. And I think the sense is that the perspective from Yang is that she's also not being a great person. And she never admits to any kind of wrong, right? And so she also puts him at a distance. So I don't know if necessarily that we are meant to also sympathize her, which is also hard. It's like, which one character is sympathetic in this?
Well, they all, I think it's maybe more empathetic where you can see the decisions or circumstances feeding into why everyone is making these kind of gross choices.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. People just want to get what get what's theirs. I don't know.
I mean, such is life, right?
What's the one sympathetic guy, Eli?
The boyfriend who Cora Meow connects with and leaves her husband for. Here, this is about to be a visual thing in an audio medium, but
Why do you have a saved photo of this man on your phone?
because I was looking at this frame of him and I was like, wait a minute, he kind of looks like me.
Face
I
at.
was like, the shape of his head.
Send it to me. I'll use this to promote the episode. Do you think that Eli looks like this man from Terrorizers?
The shape of his head is similar.
He does have a similar build. And his neck is like the same length, like proportionally. If this man can say this guy looks like him, that's a big, what do you call it? Usually you don't say people look like you.
I know, but this time I'm like, oh, wait.
Okay, but I don't think your hairline's moving back that far.
Thank you. That's sweet. Now I'm pulling my hair back to see what I look like as an egg.
That's so great. That's really, really great. I think he's in A Brighter Summer Day as well.
Wait, what? I don't remember.
Oh, is he the dad?
No. The dad is Changchen's real dad.
Wait, what?
Oh, right.
Damn. Anyway.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that when we get to A Brighter Summer Day.
Back to Terrorizers. I've been thinking about, like, there's some moments here which are like, help me place this. There's this moment that they repeat, which is Cora Meow's novelist character going to that apartment the photographer's living in, the dark room. And then he repeats it at some point later on when we are talking about something else. And it's like, there's just a shot of her going to the door and walking away after seeing.
It's when the photographer is putting together what happened based on the information from the novel, the author showing up at the door, and the teenager.
I think he might be talking to his girlfriend that he reunites with, and she's like a big reader, right? And he's asking her to explain to him.
Yeah, she's a nerd.
Yeah. She's asking him to explain to him the plot of this novel that Cora Meow writes. And as she's explaining the plot of this novel, I think images that are linking the story to what has happened in real life start forming in his head. I think this is, like, and from an editing perspective, I feel like Terrorizers is very ambitious.
Yeah.
And I think it asks a lot from a viewer, from like an attention perspective and also from a memory of what you've watched kind of perspective. Because a lot of, like, when a lot of filmmakers bring up like memory or flashbacks, they do it in a very heavy-handed kind of way where they preface it and then they show it and then they like recap what had just been like come up in memory. But I think like Yang in this film, like if you miss that moment previously, like you're not going to get it because he's only going to show you one shot of it and it's not going to be linked to anything else. Like if you didn't catch it, then sorry, you're just not going to understand this link right here. I think like Jean-Marc Vallée does this a bit in his like Big Little Lies thing.
For sure.
But he does it more often, so you're expecting it. But in the moments that it happens here in Terrorizers, you really have to be tuned in for this to click for you. Or maybe you have to rewatch this.
I feel like this might be an interesting film to segment or like to see what is the scene by scene the scene by scene flow. Because I don't feel a pattern. It's not like, okay, there's 3 storylines and we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. It's kind of just going all over the place. It's going like, sometimes it's pairing 2 narratives, sometimes it just goes straight down one narrative. And if I think about it, the kind of mass narrative feels like the scientist / novelist couple feels like the mass narrative and the other 2 are hooked onto it.
But you don't realize that until late in the game.
I guess so. I do feel like I felt more locked into that story because we followed both of these characters more. And the photographer's kind of like weaving in and out because he's kind of, makes sense, he's kind of observing what's going on.
Yeah.
And the delinquent is kind of messing shit up and causing connection between all these storylines. It's an interesting, hard to define web. It's just...
Yeah. But you don't really lock into Cora Meow and her husband's storyline until maybe halfway through the film. and the photographer and the delinquents storylines are the ones that drive the opening half. But you realize this is all hurtling towards Cora Meow and her husband's sort of split and whatever happens afterwards. We can talk about whatever happens afterwards, but
Oh, we can talk about it right now.
male rage, I don't know. I don't know what exactly it is. Yeah.
I like how, before we get to that ending, I like how that montage moment of the aha flash of memory from the photographer that Wilson describes formally draws so much attention to itself. You know, also the sound drops out. It's just the visuals, and it's very sensory. It's closer to how memory works, as Wilson's saying, in real life. But it also is cueing the audience to say, oh, this is huge. Like, this is the crux of the movie. This is what's going to take us into the finale. And one of my favorite choices of this movie is that revelation turns out to be meaningless.
Yeah. It's a coincidence.
When Li Zhao brings that information to his wife, she's like, yeah, sure, that did happen, and it maybe was a little weird, but you're ignoring the larger context of like how I've been for months and everything wrong in our relationship.
He still doesn't get it.
You're missing the forest for the trees.
It's actually really interesting. It's like a puzzle. The film's kind of like a puzzle. You're trying to figure out like what's the connection between three couples, and then the answer is, oh, the coincidence of the photographer seeing the novelist, and then his girlfriend reads novels, and then he realizes that, oh, she thought he had another girl, and then he's like piecing together, which none of this is really spelled out like so literally, right? And then he's like, oh, I need to tell this guy that his marriage broke down because of this, and he goes through the whole thing, and then everyone figures stuff out, and then it's like, this shit did not matter at all. Like, the answer to the puzzle is irrelevant.
It did not matter. It didn't matter. The connections don't matter.
Yeah, so It's like, wait, then what was the point of the whole thing, right? Like, is there a point to finding out, right? So it's a weird film, and I think that's good, because like, in terms of like puzzle box films, once you like solve it, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. But this one's just like, yeah, fuck you. You don't get anything.
Modernity is meaningless, and everyone's out here looking for purpose, but there isn't really a sense of purpose. So what do you do with that realization when there's nothing underneath you? You lash out.
There's no grand design almost. Like, the grand design of the Terrorizers is that there's no design. Like, it's supposed to be kind of senseless, which is interesting. Like, how do you sensibly make something senseless? Like,
The Terrorizers is such a good title for this movie, because terror is that kind of fear that you can't comprehend, it's inexplicable, right? Like, you look at it and you can't figure out the reasoning behind it or the design behind it.
Like, if we think about like the most terrorizer character, I mean, the name in Chinese literally just means terrorists.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is like a bit different. And I'm like, okay. And the most, I don't know, terrifying character is probably that delinquent, because she's literally going around stabbing people, and she's scamming people, and she is essentially robbing people.
With the key to that apartment that she used to share with Big Shen.
So she's like the most terrifying, but it's like, why is she doing this? She's just doing it because she wants to, you know? She like probably finds it fun.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a useful hint in what the main cop character refers to her as. He refers to her as the, quote, Eurasian.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
End quote. Yeah, that there's something that other people are clocking in her as not fitting in or not belonging.
The other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can also think about, I guess that this also links to that smoke gets in your eye scene, because the thing that starts it is the girl's like Chinese mother who comes in and puts on this American song and uses it, like she walks over to her bed and like holds her face in like a very like, I don't know, caring or
Her daughter's face, yeah.
kind of way. So I think like that relationship, even though it's not like the relationship between the mother and the daughter, even though it's not spelled out, I think there's a lot in there that is not spoken. And it's probably a driver force for her
you're helping me make sense of this character, because then it's like, okay, because she comes from a kind of broken family, then she goes around trying to break other people's families as well, right? With the prank calling, with the picking up dudes on the street and like fucking up their lives, like that's kind of par for the course for her, because she's trying to essentially extend her pain to other people.
Whereas the photographer is going around blithely unaware of the destruction that he's wreaking because he comes from a wealthy background and he's not conditioned to care about it.
He's also attracted to violence and capturing violence, right? Civil War, take notes. Yeah.
Don't speak ill of Kaylee Spady on this podcast.
I'm not speaking ill of her.
Alien Romulus.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying that Civil War is maybe a bit more on the nose about what photographers are actually doing. Like capturing, what do you call it? Capturing sensationalism for advancing their own careers, right? This guy's just like, what's serious is me taking photos of fucked up shit on the streets. Like, that's serious business. That's artistic. Artistic means ugliness.
Violent.
Which
Yeah.
Terrorizers also kind of is in itself kind of that, right?
Yeah.
Like looking at a car crash.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such an odd little movie.
Yeah. And I'm glad because, I don't know, it feels deep cutty, like in a classic.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
In our even more so than Taipei Story, because it's just it's so odd. It's really special.
Should we talk about this ending?
Yeah, let's go there.
It reminded me a lot of Breathless. You know, I don't know why. I haven't seen Breathless in forever, like Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, but there's like a bunch of violence at the end and then like someone dies. When most of the film is kind of like just people like dicking around. Tell me if I'm wrong. Like, this is my image of Breathless in my mind. Like, 60 minutes of dicking around, then 30 minutes of violence, and then someone dies.
Well, Breathless to me is like you know, when you play GTA and then like you rack up those star things, and then at the end he like had too many stars, so then he got gun, like the police came for him.
Yeah.
I think this is a little more complex. I think like this man, right, the husband who works at the lab, he has fully been left by Cora Meow, who is with her new boyfriend, who she works for.
Her novel's doing well.
Yeah, her novel's doing well. He decides to stay with his police officer buddy, and it takes... Well, in the morning, they get drunk, and then in the morning, the police officer wakes up and his gun's gone. And this guy, it might be a dream sequence, it might not be a dream sequence, goes and like kills his former employer who like denied him the position change, the promotion that he was looking for. And he also kills the boyfriend of Cora Meow's character, and then goes into the bedroom where Cora Meow's staring at him and tries to shoot her but can't, and shoots the mirror behind him. And then...
Or maybe purposely doesn't shoot her.
Yeah.
Maybe purposely. And then everyone wakes up to another gunshot. Like, I think everyone's connected, or like everyone in this story is connected. Like, Cora Meow wakes up and the police officer wakes up and there's a big gunshot.
Well, he goes and finds the delinquent teenager as well.
Oh, he does. Wait, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And then when the cop goes to kick down the door, because they've all found him now.
Yes.
Then it match cuts to the sound of a gunshot waking up the cop in another version of that morning.
Yes. Where the husband has shot himself in the cop guy's nice onsen room.
And then Cora Meow wakes up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final frame of the film is her like vomiting to the side of her bed. And I was like, I forgot that is the last frame of the film.
Yeah.
It's once again A Star is Born. He falls and she rises. It's implied their initial point of friction is that they couldn't have a child together and she had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And now she's throwing up in the morning. I think that's implying pregnancy.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
You didn't? I thought that's what that was.
The gagging, that it's like her...
Like it might be a
pregnant?
baby. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought of it in a very visceral sense, which is like, she wakes up because she metaphysically feels he has died.
It could
and
also
then
be. Yeah.
feels like something is wrong, and then she like gags. Like, but I did not think about this other end, which totally makes sense, right? Oh man, that's crazy. But this is like insane ending.
It's the same Tsai Chin thing where the opportunity opens up for her in Taipei's story once her boyfriend is dead.
But I think this one is less optimistic than Taipei's story. Like, I almost feel like it is, what's the word? It's almost like it's trying to put the needle into her, like being like almost like kind of saying like she feels this guilt, or like she feels responsible, like, or she can still feel this threat of life between her and her ex-husband. And when he dies, she feels it, right? Like on a visceral level, even though she, at this point in time, doesn't know what has happened.
I think all roads are leading towards A Brighter Summer Day. Like, I feel like Yang is inching closer and closer to, like, I guess, exploring this how male loneliness or without, like, lack of direction leads to male violence. And I guess that idea being crystallized is what happens in A Brighter Summer Day. And like, I think that is that conclusion of that. And then Yi is him exploring, like him beginning to explore something else. But
also elements of that.
Well, yeah, also elements of that. But I don't think that's like the main thing that he's trying to get to. But I think he's working at this idea for many features. And I think that's just becoming really clear to me now that we're going through these quite sequentially. So I think in the next Yang episode that we do, we'll finally like get to the heart of what Yang's trying to say about this. And also, I guess it's intertwining with Taipei and Taiwan's history and the individuals that live in Taiwan. It's complex, and it's also like universally understandable as well.
My favorite thing about how Yang constructs that path in different movies is its simultaneous inevitability and preventability. And I'm thinking here about how I believe the last image we get of Li Zhao in the version of the morning where he kills himself is blood trickling out of the back of his skull into the onsen pool. And just holding on that sound and image of the trickling and the water reminded me of earlier in the film when Big Shen is being arrested.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
There is just a trickle of water that Yang draws our attention to off of one of the buildings that goes for a while.
Tangentially, you talked a little bit about the audio being a bit interesting in this, Eli, like the ADR. Yeah. Like there's a lot of scenes where, but I think it's utilized quite interestingly, which like there are some scenes where I think they don't have the audio on set. And so what they do is they play a lot of dialogue silent, but there's atmospheric sound. And I found that to be really interesting. There's a dreamlike quality to that because it's like, what am I looking at? This is clearly not so-called real because you don't have enough real sounds to make sense of the world. So the image and the sound, there's a little connection, but it's not enough detail to really like be real. And so there's a floatiness to the image, just the best word I have right now to explain it, where things don't have physical impressions. And there's a lot of situations like this, or like surveillance footage-ish, where like the delinquent is picking up people and you can't hear what they're talking about. So there's this feeling of things not being quite there, like you are so far away, which is kind of taking a photographer's perspective, right? Because there's no audio in a photographer's perspective, technically. So I find it to be very interesting and creates a tonality to the film that is maybe different from his more realist films. You know, like this one plays a lot with montage and like what you do with music and sound and carrying over. Like when we talk about that voiceover with about the prank call, that also is a play on audio and trickery. So there's a lot going on here that is fascinating, and I don't know how much of that he does in his other films, really. And then to go back to the ending, I think there's this, I think thematically it's about like, yes, male rage, but also I think maybe about how he sees Taiwan seeing itself, because there's all this latent violence in Taipei here.
Mm-hmm.
And this final sequence is like, okay, almost like kind of a dream sequence of like what he wants to do to other people, all the people that he's angry about, all the people he wants to kill, right? And then if he's unable to do those things, then he turns the gun on himself.
This inability to cope with frustration or meaninglessness or loss of power.
So it's almost like the outward rage, the rage either directs outwards, like you don't have to really pick which is so-called the real timeline. It's like kind of irrelevant, but it's like either the rage goes outwards and you are hurting other people, or you're going to end up hurting yourself.
Even thinking about the punctuation mark on both of those options, one is the cop kicking in the door, the other is the wife throwing up, expelling from her body, that it either goes in or it goes out.
Is it this concerning
That's
ending?
great.
Man?
Yeah, it's bothersome.
Yeah. I feel like the film spends like an hour and 30 minutes just building vibes of sadness, and after it's like, yeah, fuck that shit. It's like, things are bad.
Burn it all down.
Well, you also open on violence, right? Let's not forget. Like, there's a massive shootout that starts the film.
Also, that cop looks like a gangster. Like, it's confusing.
Yeah, I wonder if that's on purpose. I bet it would be.
I think there's just Asian cops in the 80s. They just dress like that.
Oh, damn. I think also there's some really, really great performances in this movie as well. I think Cora Meow is quite fantastic. And I think it's a tough line to toe where she is like, yeah, I don't think she's likable, or I don't think Yang wants her to be likable, but I think to understand her need to like escape the routine, like she keeps on saying, and then this like big monologue that she has talking to her husband and explaining why she wants to really leave him. She just doesn't want to be stuck in the mundanity of daily life, of the routine of daily life. And I think the way that she delivers that is so good. And the way that she carries herself the entire film, it's just like, I think she's so brilliant at this. Carrying.
I added this to my new letterbox list.
Oh.
It's called I Can Fix Her.
Bro.
And there are two candidates in this.
Who's the other?
The delinquent.
I mean, yeah, true.
I mean, yeah.
You could put Taipei Story in that as well.
Maybe, yeah. It's kind of a my vibe kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, I would.
Oh, you could. Okay, yeah,
it's
you
I.
could.
See, it's I. It's not you. It's I. It's very much a personal list. Peep other fucked up entries on my list, like possession.
I'm gonna look right now. Oh my god. That's so great. That's
Anyway.
really, really great.
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I wish I had a better, not about my list, about yeah. I've been thinking a lot about like I wish I had a better, almost encyclopedic idea of Asian cinema from like the 70s or the 60s even to now, because I feel like if you look at Asian cinema after Yang, what has
after
happened?
Yang.
Yeah. Because I feel like this dude created modern art house Asian cinema. Because I'm just like, what came before the 80s? Like Asian art house cinema that is like this vibe. Not just Terrorizers, but Taipei Story even. And of course, Yang's own films later on.
I think you could pinpoint Ozu and the stillness as a starting point, but maybe not quite as slow as the Taiwanese New Wave slow cinema. Maybe Ho has more of a thumbprint.
But Ho is starting in the same time as well in this era.
Right.
You know?
But the thing is, I don't think you could attribute all of it to Yang, right?
Of course
I
not.
think you have like the In Our Time, like with that film with multiple directors. Like I think that was like people marked that as the starting point for the Taiwanese New Wave. But like I think collectively, I think Yang, Ho, Tsai,
Yang and Friends.
like they all contributed to what we view as like, I guess, indie Asian cinema or like art house Asian cinema today.
I think the Ozu thing's interesting because yes, Ozu thematically even or like, even like cinematographically yes, but Ozu kind of works in a genre. He's a genre filmmaker, you know? Whereas what's happening with the Taiwanese New Wave is that they are a collective that collected a bunch of references that they are really interested in, and like European cinema, Asian cinema, and then they kind of put it in the soup, and they don't do any one genre. They just use all these references to tell the story about Taiwan. And I think that's what's happening. And then they created a style that is built on a bunch of references from classical cinema from different countries, right?
Yeah.
Like say Hollywood or Japan, which are like two of the bigger of that time, what do you call it, movie industries. And I guess then influenced by like European cinema, which is more experimental as well. But those are kind of also national cinemas, and then pulled all of that together and then created a very distinctive style that's influenced by all these places. Right. But then also in a way, you can't just pick one of those things. It's all of them together. Then they distilled it to the things that they found were interesting, and specifically to tell the story of their place.
Like, I think it's a direct result of globalization, which is also interesting because that's what a lot of Yang's films are commenting on as well. Like,
True.
There's a lot. Yeah, actually, well, the three of them that we've talked about have all had elements about people coming back or like,
yeah,
Western
influences,
influence,
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like you could also extend that, well, not in the subject matter, but like a lot of Wong's cinema, of course, was inspired by like French or European cinema. Like you could draw that from that. Yeah. Wow. What a film, guys. Thanks for watching this. Well, I'm not thanking anyone. Yeah.
Same.
I'm glad I rewatched it. Like, I still don't know what I think about it, but I think it is very fascinating. And I think the imitators who have, like, let's say followed Terrorizers style, but like who are doing something more listless, the grander design behind them is harder to grasp. But I think you can kind of grasp what Yang is doing, and it might not work for most people. And I don't even know if it works for me. I'm confused.
I would rather a movie remain out of my grasp than be too intelligible and dumbed down.
Yeah.
Any day.
I think it's because it's not shoving that message or any kind of message down your throat that it doesn't feel it feels unintelligible, and therefore more potential for meaning that you can create for yourself. You know, he kind of just throws everything into the soup, and then you're like, okay, you figure out the taste of this. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
It's good soup.
Eli, I saw that jump from 2.5 stars to 4 stars, and that made me very happy.
Oh, yeah. What was I thinking? 2.5. That's just disrespectful.
I don't know. You're sleepy in class sometimes, and just not connecting.
It's because he finally saw himself in this movie.
Young hits different in your late 20s.
I mean, it's true.
I don't think Eli got my joke.
It's true. I think
I literally saw myself. Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV meme.
Exactly. I think watching this in college and like I guess more admiring the formal elements of the film compared to watching it now and like feeling more connected with these characters. It really grows for me. Yeah, sort of kind of despairing kind of way, but yeah, it grows. Like, damn, yeah, truly one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. Like,
yeah, he's worthy of that title for most people.
Yeah, like look at that hit rate. Like that's insane.
It is insane.
Yeah. It's insane. No misses, and we're probably gonna move on to a big hitter, right, Eli?
Yes, absolutely.
After a few weeks.
We're gonna take a break from Yang, but we're gonna come back, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. Please rate and review because that helps us keep making the show and helps others discover the show as well. And you can subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you know when our next episode drops. Keep up with us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod. And you can join us to talk about movies on our Discord server. And also we have a Patreon, and as we said at the start of the episode, there's a poll going on. Vote on what you want us to throw back to. And if you want to support us financially, we'll really appreciate it. It helps us keep running the show. You can find all these links at deepcutpod.com to find Patreon, Discord, and all these socials I've just mentioned. And also a shout... Wait, what? A shout out to also a shout out to our Patreon super supporters and our deep cut pick tier. We have one, so support her, Leah Lai. Thank you so much for supporting our podcast.
Thank you, Auntie.
Thanks, Mom.
Our biggest fan. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. And our cover art is designed by Justina Yam. And our theme song is composed by Eli Sands.
I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.